In this video, we are going to create an AI-powered chatbot. We are going to use technologies like React, Tailwind, and Node.js for the backend. So this is the system that we are going to create. For example, we are going to create a system like this, create hello, then it will respond. Then you can tell it, tell me a quote. Something like this. So this is the tool that we are going to create. We are going to need OpenAI API key so that we can fetch the API key or the data. We can power it with OpenAPI key. Then this is what we are going to create. So let's get started with this. Let's go to our Visual Studio Code. Then we are going to create two folders. Make directory Frontend. We have created that, and I'm going to make the second directory, that is the backend. So over here, I want us to start with the frontend. We set up our frontend before we set up our backend. So here we are going to use React with Vite. So we are going to create yarn create Vite. Then we are going to leave it everything as default. Then I'm going to select React. Then over here you can select the language that you want. I'm using the arrow keys to select up and down. I'm going to use JavaScript. Then I'm going to run according to the instructions. I'm going to run cd vite to the Vite, but in that case you can make it your current directory. Then over here I'm going to run yarn. Frontend, we have our code right here created. Now what we need to do, we can now test our application, yarn dev. Then we can run our code and we can see we should have our React app and running right here. Now I want us to set up our Tailwind CSS with Vite. This is how you set up your Tailwind CSS with Vite. So I'm going to go to the Tailwind CSS website, then copy this link, then basically go to the terminal. Then I'm going to add yarn, add. Then we have our project set right here. We can see that we have added Tailwind right here, and also we have added Tailwind CSS. Now what is the next step? Just go to the Tailwind config, add this file, then just copy this file in your vite.config.js. In your vite.config.js. So we need to replace this with a new piece of code. Then let's go to our CSS file, then import this CSS. Our CSS file is right here in our source. So in the index.css. I'm going to replace all that with this new piece of code. Then I don't need app.css, so I'm going to do away with it. Then I'm going to update where necessary. We already have this piece of code, so we no longer need this piece of code, so I can replace that with main. All these files are not required at the moment. I can do away with this. I can do away with this. Now when we test our application right again, it should be up and running. So we go here to our application, we reload, and we should have our app and running. So we can just write something here, h1 hello row. world. Then over here, we can test if our Tailwind CSS has been installed. So we test with font of bold, then text green 500. We can test like that, then we can run our code. As you can see, it's not loading. So we can inspect and see the error, go to the console, and you can see React is not imported in our main.css file, our main.js file. So we just come here on top, then import React just like this. Import React just like this, then everything works as expected right here. So let's rerun our application. We also need to define the React, the same method we have defined React here. We also need to define React in our main app, just like this. Then there we go. We have everything running as expected. Now from here, I want us to install all the necessary dependencies that we might require in our frontend. So the dependencies that we are going to need, we are going to add yarn add. We are going to need headless UI. We also need React hero icons, and we also need Tailwind typography. We also need Tailwind typography. Then once we are done, now we are done installing all the dependencies we need for our frontend. So I want us to structure our frontend in such a way that it's easy to use. So in our source directory, we are going to create components folder in which we are going to add our main component. We have two main components, chat.jsx, in which we are going to add all our chats right here. Then over here, we are going to create another component that we are going to call it chat message .jsx rfce to generate that boilerplate. Then there we go. Now with this said, now our application is ready to be developed. We only need these two files for now. So let me just copy piece of code here and explain what that piece of code does. In the chat message right here, we are going to need the user icons and the computer desktop icon from the hero icons that we have just installed. Then we are going also to replace this with this piece of code, in which I'm going to explain what this piece of code does. I'm going to explain what this piece of code does right here. So in this piece of code is where we are going to display our real message. So over here, we can pass some few props in which we can pass the message. And also here, we are going to pass is AI, just like this. Over here, you can see it's the Tailwind CSS styling for that particular page. So in this page, it's going to check if we have any message or not, then it's going to display the content right here. So before that, let's create the chat section. So I'm going to replace this with main. Then inside here is where we are going to have the real chat of our application. So in the real chat here, we are going to need several things here. We are going to need the form in which it's going to create this chat box, in which it's going to create this chat input. Then we're also going to need the navigation bar, and also we are going to need this component as well. So let's create this piece of code here. We are going to define some few things here, like the message or the messages. Then we are going to set the messages in which these messages will be displayed right here. So these the prompts that we are going to pass right here. Also, we are going to create another input in which it's going to take the input and we pass React right over here, in which it's going to take it as a string. So we are going to also set up the loading state. If we have entered the chat, then it's loading, so we are going to pass the state right there. So once we define all these states, we are going to define all the main sets that we want. So over here, I'm going to pass the message add reference as the React ref. I'm going to use the ref instead of using the use state ref right here. I'm also going to need const input ref, just like this. Then I'm going to use the use ref. So once we have defined all these states, it's all the states that we need for now. Also, we are going to need some few icons, in which the icons, we are going to use the icons from the paper airplane icons, right, like that. Then over here, now we can write our UI, we can style our user interface. So over here, I want us to style this user input, and I'm going to be using Tailwind CSS to style all my pages. So we are going to review this piece of code right here. In which this piece of code, we have defined the header, and we need the header takes the full width, background color of white, border, then border of gray, then we have the shadow of small. In this other div here, it has a maximum width of 7 XL, then MX of auto, PX of 4. In a smaller screen, we have PX of 6. In a larger screen, we have PX of 8. Then in PY, we have, or in the padding of Y axis, we have 5 pixels, just like that. Then also the same for the title for this header right here. Then also here we have more styles of the AI paragraph or header. So once we try our code right here, we can see we have some few progress, but we can see we don't have any progress, so we need to restart our server. We need to restart our server so that we can see real time changes like this. So you can see still displaying that. So we need to configure our application such that it can read the chat. Okay, it can read the chat. But before that, let's continue writing our piece of code right here. I'm going to create another div right here, in which this division is going to have a class. I'm going to write some few styles. This div is going to house the messages and everything that we need right here. So in this component here, we are going to pass the messages dot length. We are going to check if we have any messages that we have. So right here, I'm going to write my few lines of code. Just like this. Then over here is where I'm going to define the logic, or I'm going to basically, I want us to see when we load this application, before it has anything, we have these components right here, or we have this text right here, the opening chat. Because we don't have anything or any messages that we have added or we have asked, it's going to load and show this. So that's what we are doing by adding this section right here. So I'm just going to copy this piece of code as well. Then over here, if we don't have any messages, or the messages.length is equal to 0, then show this user input, or these icons, and also start a conversation or ask anything. Now, what if we add any messages that we have printed out or we have asked? So we are going to pass the messages.map, then we pass the message, then the index right here. Then we are going to make sure that we close our component correctly. So we have the messages.map, then we pass the message, index, and right here. So inside here, we can pass now the icon that we just passed. We can now pass these components right here. You see these components that we had here. Now we can pass here, that is the message component. We want to pass the chat message component right here. I'm going to import it just like that. Then we are going to pass that component right there. And as you can see, we have one more remaining, and there we go. So this one pairs with this, and this one pairs with this one right here. So once we pass the chat component right here, that means now we can just come here into our app, then pass the chat component right here, import the chat component right here. Now once we pass this chat component, that means we can review or we can preview some of our parts of this application. As you can see, we have the pro scale chat, then we have other parts of the application. So we need to do away with this, so we can do away with that. It's now working, and there we have our navigation bar. So over here, we can keep on working on this. So let's work on this and make sure that it works correctly. So over here in the chat, if we have any messages, then pass the message right here. So here, over here, I'm going to pass the message in which the key is going to be the index, this index right here. Then the message will be message.text. We are going to pass the text from that image. Then this one is going to read, is it an AI message right here? So we are going to pass the message dot is AI, just like that. Then we have our component already built right here. So once we check on the progress, we can still see anything. We are yet to build the chat input. But before we build the chat input, I want us to rectify this. Message.length is not greater than or is equal to, should be equal to 0. Then if the message is equal to 0, then it should show this, otherwise it should show a different conversation. As you can see, now this one is working correctly. Now the last part is building the loader and also the input field. So to build the loader or the loading component or the loading part of the application, it's very simple. We just pass the loading state here. So this one is loading. We should rectify this. Is loading. It's loading. So here set is loading as well. Now this one is no longer complaining. So over here, we just display this into terms of flex, and then we have a space of 2. And in each loading, we just animate by bouncing, then height of 2, width of 2, color of pink, then rounded of full. Then, as you can see, this will be displayed right here. And also, after that, we can build the message and ref. Now, right here, we are going to create now our main component, in which this component is the component that is going to have all our form. So right here, I'm going to create a form with no action, but with the state of submit. Then this form I'm going to set on submit. On submit, it should handle submit, in which we are going to create that handle submit functionality or function with JavaScript or with our React. So right here, we are going to use a piece of code that has already been defined right here. Then we are going to explain how this code basically does. So in this form, we have a function called handle submit, in which we are going to create the form. Then right here, we define our max width of 7XL, then MX of auto. Then the rest of the styles remain here. To get these templates or to get these exact styles, I have added the GitHub link here on the description. Kindly check on the description, then get the GitHub link for this project so that you can check on the CSS styling. So on the input here, we pass the reference as the input ref, then the value as input, then the set input then its loading is disabled once we submit our code. So right here on submit, the button submit, it's disabled if we don't have any text on the input. So on the paper here is just the small icon that we can see here. It's just this small icon that we can see here, the icon that has been disabled. So that's the component. Now I want us to build the JavaScript part that is basically working on the functionality of this application. Over here, we are going now to create the button or the functionality that is handle submit, in which this function is going to have, it's going to be an asynchronous function, in which inside here is where we are going to write all these inputs. So over here, we are going to write e.prevent prevent the default behavior of a form submission, that is e.prevent default, because a form has the ability to auto submit on a simplest mistake as possible. So if there's no input, then disable the submit button. So if we don't have any input that has been inputted, then disable the input message right here. So here we define const user message. Const user message is equal to the input dot stream. Then over here we can set the input. We can set basically the input as an empty input. So we can also try to load set messages. We can try to load the previous messages in case we have any previous messages. We can set the previous messages here. So if we have any previous messages or any previous context, we can just use it right here. So we pass the text as the user message, then is AI, we set it as false right here. So in case the messages have been loaded, then all the messages have not been loaded, set the loading as true. Here we can use the try catch block, in which it's going to try catch. It's going to catch the errors in case we have any errors right here. We're going to implement the error, so let's first focus on this functionality here. So const response is equal to await fetch. It's going to await fetch. Then right over here, we are going to write the exact route in which we are going to require our API endpoint from. In this, we are going to implement the backend part of the chat. Then right here, we implement the method as post. Then we set the headers content type. Then we pass the body. right here. Now once we are done with that, we can pass the body and the body right here. Now over here, what we can do is basically inside the catch we const data is equal to await the response.json. Then right here we set messages. We can set the messages as previous, just like this, as simple as it looks. Then right here we can set the previous, then we can pass the content right here. Now you can implement the error message instead of writing the console. Then it basically tells us we set messages. We can set the messages as basically previous. Then we can pass the text right here. Then the text here, we can implement a better text in which we can say sorry, there was an error while processing this piece of code or while processing this request. Now we are done with all the front-end part of our website. Now what we need to do, or what we want to do, is basically create the backend part of it. Creating the backend part, we are going also as well, make sure that we open the terminal. Then we change to backend. Then inside here, the backend, it's very simple. We are going to install all the dependencies right here. For us to start our backend, this is what we can do. We just need to yarn init, yarn init, yarn initialize, and we can set everything to yes. Then when we see our backend right here, we have a package.json file that has been generated. Now right here in the backend, we can add all the necessary dependencies that we need. We need to add only 4 dependencies or libraries. We need Express, we need .env, we need course, then we need OpenAI, just like that. Then we install all our dependencies just like that. Now I want us to run our application. Our application is still running right here. Now we have the user input right here. So we can test our application and say hello. Then we can wait. Hello, how can we assist you? This one is still not working, so let's go and work on our backend application. So on our backend application, once we install all these dependencies that we need, we can basically create 2 files right here in our backend. We need .env file, where we are going to add our API keys. Then right here, we also need to have our server.js file. In our server.js file, we are going to const express is equal to require express. We also need const course. We are going to require course. Then const .env, we are going to require env. Then also const, we need OpenAI. We're also going to require OpenAI, just like that. Then once we do that, we need to configure the .env.config. Now right here, we can start our application. We can initialize our application. Const app is equal to express. Right here, we can set our dependencies right here. That is app.use course, then also app.use express. Then right here, now we can start our port. Our port will be basically port. Const port is equal to process.env.port to 3000. In our port, once we are done like that, now we can start our application. That is app.listen to port, in which our port, we are going to pass our port right here. We can say console.log server running on this particular port. Once we run our application, then our application will start and run correctly. Now we can start our backend. In our backend, we only need to do yarn dev. Then as you can see, dev are not defined. So we are going to fix that. So right here, now we can define, or we can first initialize. We can first initialize the OpenAPI key. This is how we use the OpenAPI key. Const OpenAPI is equal to new OpenAI. Then we pass OpenAPI key. Then is equal to OpenAPI key, in which we are going to get the OpenAPI key. Then pass right here. Right here, we are going to require the endpoints. The chat and endpoints. We are going to use the app.post, in which is going to post to app to API / chat, and in which this one is an asynchronous function. In which this asynchronous function, we are going to write, or we are going to try. We are going to use the try catch block as well. So right here, we are going to pass const message is equal to require or required dot body right here. So if we have a message like this, if we have a message, or if we don't have a message, then return 400. A message is required. So right here, we are going to pass the completion, in which the completion is going to be OpenAI, in which we defined right here, .chat.completion.create. Then over here, we are going to choose the model of AI that we are going to use. We are going to use GPT 3.5 Turbo. Then we are going to pass the message here as the role is equal to the user. Then we are going to pass the message right here. We can also add more users in this case. In this case, we can add more users. We can add role as the system. Role can be system. Then content, you are a helpful assistant. We can pass as many roles as we can or as we want. Right here, we can also pass the temperature of 0.7. Then we can set our maximum tokens as the number of tokens that we want to use. We can use tokens 500 tokens. Now right here, we are we have created that functionality. Now const, we define const AI response, AI response, AI response. Make sure that you complete a single message one by one, then loop through all through the messages that have been completed. Then we are going to pass the response.json, then return the AI response message that has been returned. So right here on the error message right here, we can just pass an error message of response.status of 500, then say error processing your request, just like that. Now after writing this, we need to do error handling middleware. We can create a error handling middleware, in which we are going to use the app.use, in which it's going to use the error, the request response, and next. The next one, we are not going to use it. As well, we are not using the request. So right here is going to give us the response as status of 500. Then it's going to send this response right here. Now our app is up and running correctly. Now we need to test our application. To test our application, now we need to start our app in the backend, yarn dev. Then we can just go, in case you can't see the run script, you just need to go right here. You can replace your backend package.json with this existing JSON file, just like this. Then once we run the app python yarn dev like this, now our application need to install yarn add node one. Then we run our application yarn dev, and there we go. Application is up and running. So what we need to do, as you can see, it's waiting for my API key. So for my API key right here, you are going to create in your env file. In your env file, you are going to have two files. You are going to have the two files that, or you are going to have two main things. You need the port, and also you need OpenAPI key. Go to your OpenAPI key, then get your API key. Then once you get your API key, you are going to add it right here. So I'm not going to add mine for security reasons. I added my API key. Now I can test the application just like this. So you can see, as you can see now, once we run our application, we can start our application. Then we can say hello. And there we go. How can we assist you? Create. You can see it's still disabled. You can refresh and say create a simple HTML code for hello world. Wait for response, and there we go. It has created the HTML for us. So we have created that we have emulated all this system using React and Node.js for our application. To get the code for this project, just go to the description. We have added the link for that project. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.